Faith can be a struggle sometimes. When things go well, faith can be uplifting, right? It helps us through our troubles, carries us buoyant against the forces of hell that are trying to bring us down, against the negativity of the world. But sometimes that faith doesn't seem so powerful. Sometimes the concerns of the world make it through the cracks. Sometimes your faith ends up feeling like a target painted on your back. Something that's just drawing attention. Something that's asking to be attacked by doubts and fears. Because the world can be hostile to our faith. It can make us feel isolated and alone. And so, if we want to stay afloat in this storm, there are 2 steps we're going to have to take. But first, let's think about our story. Our story is a picture of what those times of doubt in our lives might look like. The death of John the Baptist and the disciples all alone out on a boat in the storm. It's an illustration of the battles that we go through, of temptation, the struggle that happens when our faith is challenged. Even in the depths of that storm, the Lord will be there to show us a way out. But again, at the beginning, we have the disciples afraid and alone. Right? They just heard this terrible news. John the Baptist was perhaps the Lord's first disciple. Before either of them were out of the womb, he recognized the Lord and his authority. And he was just killed. So not only would the disciples have been sad because many of them knew him, or at least knew of him, they were also afraid. Here was King Herod, the son of the king who tried to kill the Lord in the Christmas story. He had killed John the Baptist, this well-liked, important guy. What about them? Were they going to be next? Were they going to be targeted for following the Lord? It's that fear that makes our faith weak. So there they are feeling that. And then on top of that, the Lord tells them to go out, take the boat across all on their own. He goes up on a mountain to pray, and then they get stuck in a storm. Not a good time. Have you ever not felt the Lord's presence in your life? A time when you didn't think about it or didn't notice it? Or worse, when you looked for it and couldn't find it? We all have those times when the Lord just doesn't seem present in our lives. And it usually happens when we're just focused on the natural world and natural worldly things. For example, if you're rushing to work or rushing to get to school on time, are you thinking about the Lord? Do you feel his presence in that moment as you're racing towards your car? Or if you're cramming for a test or to finish a chore, get the house clean before guests are coming over, are you feeling the Lord in that moment? Do you see his presence? Or something even more mundane, not stressful. Imagine it's a Tuesday and you're chatting with a coworker about the traffic, or hanging out with some friends for some evening games. Are you paying attention to the Lord in that moment? Probably not. Maybe sometimes. But the natural world takes up most of our time and attention. We don't spend every second focused on spiritual things. And that's just normal life. So we often go about this, not thinking about the Lord, for long periods of time. And if we go too long without thinking about the Lord, without taking a moment to focus, then we become vulnerable. We become an easy target for the hells. And that's when the wind picks up and the storm comes. Because the hells don't want to attack us when we feel the presence of the Lord. Right? When we see his strength in our life, that's not when the hells are looking to bring us down. It's when we're alone. Not when we are focused on the Lord and the right thing to do and how to do it. When we're just focused on other things, focused on the things of the world, and we don't feel his presence. That's when we become vulnerable to doubts and temptations. When we feel like we are alone, it's a lot easier to justify the bad choices we might make. It's easier to distract ourselves from thinking about what's right. It's pretty easy to just slip into what feels good, even though we know it's wrong. Because we feel alone. We're making our own decisions. That's the rain starting to fall and the wind picking up. And it's so easy to slip into that storm without realizing it. We just focus on our day-to-day life, and suddenly, there we are, fighting a battle, and we don't feel the Lord with us. The heavenly doctrine describes this situation of temptations that we go through here in Arcana Celestia, number 2338. Temptations are attended with doubt in regard to the Lord's presence and mercy, and also in regard to salvation. The evil spirits who are then with the person and induce the temptation strongly inspire the negative. But the good spirits and angels from the Lord, in every possible way, dispel this state of doubt and keep the person in a state of hope, and at last confirm them in what is affirmative. Amen. Temptation is a battle between heaven and hell that's happening inside of us. And yet, even though it's a pretty even battle, it has to be in order for the Lord to keep us in freedom, when we're there, it doesn't feel like it. When we are struggling with something, we don't see the other side. Because hell is that storm. The wind and the waves attacking the boat, threatening to sink the disciples. But heaven, the angels, that's the boat we're in. And if you're on a boat in a storm, you aren't concentrated on, oh, thank goodness, this boat is here keeping me up. You're focused on the wind that's threatening to knock you over, the waves that are crashing over on top. So when we're in that moment, we don't see the two sides of it. We feel like we are alone, fighting against all the forces of hell just by ourselves. And when we're focused on the wind and the waves, when we're focused in that negative space where we feel alone, where we feel like we have no power, suddenly, when things feel like they couldn't get any worse, they do. For the disciples, this moment was as they were in this storm, worried that they weren't going to make it back to shore, they look out on the waves and they see a ghost. They see an image of death, a harbinger of the end that's going to come to them. Complete despair. The Heavenly Doctrine describes this as well in the Arcana Celestia 8567. For temptations are continual despair of salvation. In the beginning slight, but in course of time grievous, until at last there is doubt, almost denial, of the presence of the divine and his aid. In temptations, the spiritual life is for the most part brought to this extremity, for in this way the natural life is extinguished. Temptation is awful. It's difficult. It's painful. We get ourselves in these situations where we feel completely alone against the forces of hell, against everything negative in the world. And we get to this state where we start questioning whether the Lord is there to help us at all. We don't see his presence in our life. We don't feel his presence. And we start to wonder, how am I going to make it out of this? Is the Lord really going to save me? But we are not alone. As soon as the disciples looked out and saw what they thought was a ghost on the water and reached that pit of despair, immediately the Lord calls out to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." That passage that I just read on despair, I only gave you half of it. It continues, "The natural life is extinguished, because then, in the midst of despair, the inmost is kept by the Lord in combat against falsity, and therefore this despair is soon dissipated by comforts that are next insinuated by the Lord. For after every spiritual temptation, there is consolation, and as it were, newness of life." Amen. When we think we're alone, we think the Lord is somewhere far off, right? We might recognize that he's there, but we don't feel him. We don't think that he's close and present in our life and in our struggle. But the Lord isn't off on that mountain. He's right there on the water with us, ready to help. And if we look, we can see him. Now, maybe it happens by chance. A passing comment someone says reminds us and brings that presence to mind. Or maybe you see someone's motivational quote from the Word hanging on the wall, and that day it just strikes you, and you feel the Lord with you. Or you're out and you see a beautiful sunset, and you're struck with awe at the Lord's creation, and you feel his presence. Or sometimes it won't be so automatic, and you have to go looking by reading the Lord's Word, or praying, or reflecting on yourself. But once we realize that the Lord is there, once we realize that we're not alone, we can do something. Because up until this point, we are caught in the tension of heaven and hell. We don't see a way forward. But once we see the Lord, now we can act. Now we can do something. Peter, as soon as he saw the Lord, he cries out for help. And that's what we should do too. As soon as we remember that we are not alone, we ask the Lord for his help. The first step to staying afloat in the storm is to choose not to give in. Ultimately, that's what this struggle is. Hell is doing its best to have you choose to give in. But once we know that the Lord is there, we can do what Peter did. We can take that first step out onto the water. We can make the decision to resist the hells, despite their threat. He saw the storm that was around him, and he took that step. When we know the Lord is there for us, we can make that choice. We see the evils that the hells want us to perform, and we say, no, I'm not going to make that decision today. No, I'm not going to let myself keep following this mental path into despair. No, I'm not going to let myself wallow in self-pity instead of doing something to improve my mood, to feel better. No, I'm not just going to give myself this excuse to do what I want to, because I know that it's an excuse and it's the wrong thing. We make the choice and take the step. Peter sees the storm around him, but he doesn't give it. He chooses to take the step onto the water. That's step one. But then Peter begins to sink. And that's why we need to remember there are two steps. We can see the problem if we look at why Peter sinks. It says he looks at the storm after he's taken the step, and now he's terrified. When we go to take that step, when we say, okay, I'm going to resist the forces of hell, I'm going to resist all that pressure and temptation, that's step one, but that hasn't gone away. All of that pressure and temptation is still there. All of that inclination to do the selfish thing, to take the easy way out, that's still there, even when we say to ourselves, I'm going to fight it. Because we can't fight it. Peter can't walk on water. The Lord can let Peter walk on water. If we make that choice to fight that temptation and we say, all right, I'm going to do this. I am going to fight off all the forces of hell that want me to do bad things, that want me to be selfish and unkind. I've got this. Well, it's a bold attitude, but you can't do it. The Lord has all of the power. And that's step two. Step two is acknowledging and remembering that you aren't the one fighting here. You need to take that step, but the Lord's in control. It's not us fighting the storm, it's Him. And against the Lord, the storm, all the forces of hell are nothing. If we're willing to take the step, to choose to act against the evil, against the hells that want to pull us down, and when we do, we remember it's the Lord's power, there's nothing hell can do. The storm can't bring us down. O you of little faith, why did you doubt? When they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Amen.